Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome back again to Voice of Youth as we talk about the farmers' protest. Once again, I am joined by Gurneet and Gursehaj. So I forgot to thank them at the end of the last episode, but thank you too for joining us for this two-part episode itself. But let's get straight into it. One thing that I did mention quickly at the end of the last episode was that people aren't really talking about it. And what I mean by that is that I've got a lot of friends that, when the Black Lives Matter protest, when that, Black Lives Matter has been around, it's not something that just started in 2020. It's been a while, been around before that itself. But then after what happened in 2020, a lot of people I know, they started sharing posts, they started sharing all these kind of media, voicing their support for Black lives and everything that's going on there. And I'm not trying to in no way put anything against Black Lives Matter protests and everything that's going on there. But it is important to note that I personally, from people I know, haven't seen as much support or people sharing posts and doing stuff about the farmers' protest that's happening. I don't know if the two of you have seen similar things or have noticed similar things regarding your close friends, but that's something I clearly noticed. And I just wanted to bring that up because one of the reasons why I really want to do these episodes and do them properly is because then you all the audiences out there, the two guests here, share them with these videos with people that aren't necessarily Punjabi or in any way related to what's going on right now. Because there are so many problems in the world right now. And as people, we are more likely to go towards or talk about ones that we relate to or that affect us the most. So I am fully aware of that, and I understand why some people may be prioritizing other, issues in the world and trying to promote that and trying to get word out there of that over this. But I just wanted to bring that up and, bring up the fact that people aren't really talking about it. So, Gursehaj, well, what are your thoughts on this itself? Why people aren't talking about it?
A big thing to do with that is, if we talk about it, if we take an example of Black Lives Matters. So the US, the media, it is partisan. It does have its leaning towards one party, but still, majority of their reporting is fair and honest. But that's not the case with India. Indian government, from back, it got its way of promoting its official narrative in the Indian media. So as people have termed it like Godi media. So because the media is the first place where people get information and they make their minds up. And because Indian media not being fair and honest in its journalism, so a lot of people are misguided about the whole protest issue and they're not coming in support of the farmers. On the other hand, the social media, I'd say, have played a big role in putting out information for the world. That's why we see protests happening in Canada, in the US, in the diaspora countries where we got so many diaspora people living. So social media has been a measure to the paid Indian media that's been telling lies and just making things up to defame the farmer protests and to let down this movement.
Yeah, and speaking of social media, that ties into one of the things that Gurneet brought up in the previous episode, and one of the other reasons why I think this hasn't, or at least before it actually occurred, been brought to the wider public eye. Well, the wider public haven't talked about it, even though, as I had mentioned before, even after what I am about to say, people that I do know have not really shared or talked about this as much. But it is Rihanna's tweet. So a celebrity from America brings light onto the fact that there is something like this happening in India. And then you see all of these other people come out and either, support it or, you see a lot of celebrities in India itself come out and say India together and all that kind of stuff. And we'll get into that in a second. But yeah, I think it's true through the celebrity that brought it up, through, someone big from a Western country mentioning this on social media that really, is one of the other things that really brings such a, event like this into the limelight some more. Gurneet, as you mentioned that in the previous episode, what are your thoughts on what's happened with Rihanna with the tweets and everything as such?
Well, funnily enough, it took that one tweet of Rihanna's to provoke a response from the government. And until then, you'd have minor little, chief ministers that would tweet about it, release a statement about it. But once Rihanna tweeted, then you sort of see the outlook and the outreach that the government has. And they've definitely paid off cricketers, actors, to, do the whole India together thing. And some have even said we don't need foreigners, interfering in our national affairs. And then I argue otherwise, because if you weren't doing your job, you wouldn't need so-called foreign interference. And, India sort of seeks to thrive from social disparity, inequality, and it's finally getting the attention that it should have gotten a long, long time ago. If the Modi government, BJP, if they all succeed in their intent, India wouldn't be a democracy, there wouldn't be freedom of speech, there wouldn't be anything left. We'd just see a Hindu nationalist state. And I think Rihanna's tweet, Greta Thunberg's tweet as well, finally called the attention that it needed. And it's sad to see that, portraits of them are being burnt down. Without a doubt, if any of them set foot in India, they'd be arrested on arrival. And anything that threatens the control that India wants to exercise over all its citizens, they wouldn't hesitate to get rid of that. And then it goes back on to Kangana's tweet where she said something along the lines of the cancer of this nation has been identified and now the process of eradication has begun. This woman is openly calling for genocide. She won't get arrested. She's against the haq of apne bande, of Sikhs, of Punjabis, of farmer protests. But the people who are calling for their rights, they're the ones who are supposedly terrorists. And then you kind of start to see what the game really is. No one said a word against Kangana, and God forbid another 1984 from occurring. But, she's gone up the ladder again in the eyes of Hindu nationalists. And that's how they throw the dice over there. So, yeah.
Yeah, and one thing to note as well, because while I was just looking back over the tweet from Rihanna, that happened in the 3rd of February. And as we've mentioned in the last episode itself, these protests started in September. So September, October, November, December, January. There, my hand was not on screen there. 5 months until Rihanna posted it, and then more people started coming out about it itself. So the two of you, as we've quickly mentioned itself, you also brought up India Together. Can you elaborate a bit more about that? Or Gursehaj, do you yourself know much about what they mean by India Together itself, that hashtag?
So it's more of a propaganda hashtag that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in India have been trying to project in the world. So there have been reports that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, although this is not certified, verified, there's been reports that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs have been sending a whole list of points to the Indian stars to promote on their social media, just to counter that Rihanna tweet. That just comes back to the suppressing of dissent by the government. The government is hell bent on doing whatever it can to stop its dissent in the country, the fair demands of its own citizens. And we gotta be mindful here that all the machineries that government is putting in place, it's not against a foreign power, it's not against China or Pakistan, it's against its own citizens. It's spending millions of dollars every year across embassies to interfere in the diaspora. For example, there was a report just last year that Indian spy was arrested in Germany for spying on Sikhs in Germany. So is that not interfering in the affairs of other community or the country?
All right, so interesting.
Yeah.
Because one thing I also want to quickly just double back to, when you brought up the influence of the celebrities and stuff, we know in Bollywood and stuff, all these actors, they have such a huge influence on the people itself. Like the easiest example to go to is how many people just crowd to their houses when you see how massive these Bollywood stars are. And I'll quickly just put up a couple of the tweets there itself, because like you said, you mentioned propaganda, that these tweets are propaganda, but then we can see in Ajay Devgun's tweet here, 3rd of February, the day after Rihanna's tweets, don't fall for any false propaganda against India or Indian policies. It's important to stand united at this hour without any infighting. India together, India against propaganda itself. So they themselves, through these tweets, they're claiming that what's happening with the protest itself is a form of propaganda. What Rihanna is saying is a form of propaganda. And propaganda, is just essentially political, promotion in a sense. But in this, what I found most interesting itself, and it's very hard to see, but it's the Akshay Kumar and Saina Nehwal, I believe, their tweets itself are more or less identical, and it goes to show what you said yourself when they were being sent points or maybe something along the lines to kind of get out there and just say these things so that way the people of India wouldn't be riled up by what they're hearing and they'd be in support of the government because these major stars are itself. And do either of two of you know of any major stars that maybe supported the farmers' protest before Rihanna's tweet? I believe there was one singer, I cannot recall his name right now. Do either of the two of you remember?
Well, I kind of take this aspect of it a bit personally because I was a big fan of Bollywood, and in fact, I had to remove a lot of Kangana movies from my watch list, and I was a really, really big fan of her outlook, and she would speak up against nepotism, and she was a very strong-willed person. So I just felt really, it was really disheartening for me to having to witness someone that I actually looked up to once upon a time. But I believe Siruddin Shah and Taapsee Pannu, I know that there's a few more, and they're actually in support of the farmer protests. But from the mentality of the ones that were bought off, you can look into psychology and into the natural human psyche that once you're told you're superior, that's all you see. So with these actors, I don't know how they were contacted to make these tweets, but they were basically told, all you need to tweet is this, and we'll give you 2 million, 3 million, 10 lakh, I don't know. And that's all they see. We're just going to be, paid off for putting up one tweet. But then it goes back into this experiment that was actually done in 1970s by Jane Elliott. Once someone was told, this whole classroom was told that, if you have blue eyes, you're superior than the ones with brown eyes. They don't do any of their research into it. They just believe that, we have some form of superiority, we have the authority, and that means we're able to downplay everyone else. That's the mentality that all the ones who have been bought off go by. Once you're told that you have control, you don't see anything above or below that.
Right. But it is a fact that they do have control, because we all know, I myself, I'm a filmmaker. I love watching Bollywood films because, they're a different aspect of filmmaking and everything from that. But now, there's always been, we won't get into, too much into the past and other Bollywood celebrities that may have voiced their opinion out against, minorities in India itself, with them using their powers. And, obviously we brought our minorities. One final thing that I wanted to bring up is whether or not this is itself a farmers' protest, or has it always been, or has this grown into being more of a Sikh protest itself? What are your two thoughts?
I think it started off definitely as basic human rights, but with the government has made us resist against their inhumane attempts, torture, barricades, water cannons and whatnot. They know, it's a natural, human response. Once you're being hurt, you're going to react somehow. And that's what they're tapping into. They're making us majboor enough to react, and then they use our reactions as labels for terrorism, anti-India and all that type of stuff. But in the end, I wouldn't say that it's just an attack on Sikhi itself. We don't need to look too far into history to realize that Muslims are marginalized against as well. There was the Citizenship Amendment Bill that was passed in 2019, and that mentions every religious minority but Muslims for taking refuge in India. And back then there were protests as well. So, and there's another cycle happening. In 2019 or 18, it was against Muslims, and now largely farmers, I'm not saying all, but there's a large amount of farmers in Punjab stemming from the Sikh religion. So there is, a pattern of oppression against non-Hindus.
Right, yes. Because there's this, let me put this up itself, this segment from an article from opendemocracy.net, and they talk about how they, like you mentioned, the Punjab region, a large portion of it is a Sikh population. That's why also a large population of the farmers protesting right now are of the Sikh religion. And they mention how this is something against somewhat of a religious intention as well. Even at the bottom here, I just noticed now reading it, they also bring up the claim of the woman activist detained and sexually assaulted, as we previously brought up with No Deep Core itself. And so by this becoming as it's grown, developed and everything, does this becoming more of less about the farmers and more about, minorities being targeted, and, as it grows in idea, does that take away from the protest itself? Is that what's your view on that, Gursehaj?
I think just to touch on the previous question, to say it is a farmers' protest or a Sikh protest, it's not the right way to go, because this is a very multi-dimensional movement in itself. If we're talking about the Sikh way, so as we all know that Punjab, especially Punjab and the Sikhs, Punjab is at the helm of the revolutionary spirit. It's a gurti that our Guru Sahibs have given us, and it's always been the Punjab against the.
Gursehaj, I believe you've been cut off for the past few sentences that you've just said. You've just got back to us right now, so you're all good there. Do you mind just restating what you just mentioned?
Yeah, I think that the protest from a Sikh perspective, to call it it's not a Sikh movement, or call it it's not a farmers movement, they both are not the correct way to go. So I believe that when the Sikhi comes, because Punjab and the Sikhs, it's the gurti that our Guru Sahibs have given us, that revolutionary spirit, that it's a duty of the Sikhs to stand up to oppression. And this have been Sikhi and the commitment to sovereignty, resistance, and Sapatapala. The Khalsa Panth have always resisted any invasion and uprooted the Delhi-based empires. So what I mean is that the Sikhi, in terms, it gives us the resistance and the motivation for the protest. You look at the pictures of the protest, you see symbols, discourses, and institution on the ground that are the physical representation of the Sikhi. Sikhs are serving langar there, Sikhs are doing discourses, the nishans are displaying high. That's the resistance, that's the spirit which is fueling the whole protest. But it's not a Sikh movement, because people from different geographic regions, from different cultures and identities, they have been a huge and influential part of this protest. So I think that Sikhi is a guiding force and the spirit of the protest, but it's a farmers' protest, and it should be treated like one.
So then what about, as in this image here as well, we see people, chanting for Khalistan, chanting for all these things, which are not really related to why this protest is happening, and they're dragging all these other things into it itself. What are your two thoughts on that? Do you think this is something which should be happening, and they're bringing that up to it, it's fine, it's good, even though it would detract away from what is in some aspects the bigger issue at heart? What are your two thoughts on that?
I think that to say that the protest has nothing to do with Khalistan, it's not the fair judgment, because the protest, the root of all the problems is with the relationship of Indian government and Punjab from 1947. Because go back to 1947 until today, the Indian government purposefully did not industrialize or diversify the economy of Punjab. it was heavily dependent on the agriculture sector. And because of that, because if there's any shift in the global agriculture market, because these days, uh, there's a term called agrarian transition. Every global economy is going through that agrarian transition. So what that means is pulling people from the agriculture sector and putting them in the industrial sector, in the high value good market. But that's not achievable in Punjab, because more than 70 or 80% of the population of Punjab is still works in the agriculture sector. And now you're putting bills on top of on the already difficult situation in Punjab, because Punjab is just not going through the bills right now. It has water issues, the river water issues. It got soil desertification. It has environmental degradation. There are all these issues that lines up, and it just comes back to the point that the government of India has been trying since 1947 to somehow subdue Punjab so that they cannot realize their autonomy and their sovereignty, their Halimi Raj. And people like us, we are living in foreign countries. That's not because we wanted to. This was a forced migration on us, because there was no agriculture, there was no employment in Punjab. So our parents, our grandparents, they chose to leave their countries and go settle to other countries in hope for a better lives for their children. So this is a purposeful act by the Indian government. And you know all these issues, they line up. All these issues, they line up to be the anger that we are seeing in the protests today. And that's at hand.
So you believe that there are so many minor, not necessarily minor, but I mean like smaller details, so many things which are like you brought up, forced migration, what's going on with the water in Punjab, all these other things. Obviously, like you said, Khalistan has a part to do with it as well. It all, in a sense, can be just simplified to Punjab versus the central government. I'm going to assume that's a yes, or you're frozen.
Yeah,
I believe. Yeah. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So if it's as simplified as that, is there no point at which we can say, or which people should say, these you shouldn't bring into these minor things? Because if you bring up all these smaller things, can't it corrupt a more overall message itself? Because if you bring up the whole Khalistan thing, if you bring up you forced my grandparents to migrate out of here, whatever one individual person might be thinking, or one group of people that are marching with them might be thinking, does that not take away from the core reason why they're marching, the core reason why celebrities out there have supported this, or in all that kind of stuff, in a sense? Gurneet, what are your thoughts about that? Do you agree that all these minor things are justified in this overall farmers' protest, whichever label you want to put on the protest right now, but a protest against the 3 bills that were passed?
Well, I think you have to look at how well the Indian government can brainwash people as well. So with all the people who are for the 3 bills that have been passed, they've probably heard is, it's going to increase the contact between traders, buyers, corporations, between farmers. So it's just going to make their relationship more direct. That makes it beneficial for farmers. But the real question people should be asking is, how will it impact farmers? And again, it's already started. It makes them more vulnerable to exploitation. And that wouldn't be a question if the government was doing their job. So in regards to Khalistan as well, I believe everything is a bit of an umbrella sort of term here. Punjab waters has uranium, which is causing cancer. 75% of Punjab's waters are being diverted to other places that aren't Punjab. So our government obviously is centralized, and the government doesn't care enough to remove the danger from the waters. It doesn't care enough to give us back our electricity, our water. Back in like the 1960s or something, they were trying to nationalize the Hindi language all over India as well. So I think the question for Khalistan comes out. A lot of our people are afraid that if we don't have our own sovereign nation, the matters that mean so much to us, such as our language, our agriculture, our history, that won't be preserved anymore. So a large number of our people believe that Khalistan is the answer to end us begging on our knees to get simple human basic rights. So again, yes, water, crops, all of that are basic human rights, but people believe that under Khalistan, we would have more of a say and independency from the central government, and we'd be safer. We wouldn't have cancer flowing through the water. We wouldn't have dry deserts in Punjab. If Punjab has most of the water, there shouldn't be, deserts. There shouldn't be burning of crops. There shouldn't be all that going on.
Right.
Yeah.
So I feel like this, talking about Khalistan, would things be solved by Khalistan? The idea of Khalistan itself is something we should save for another video. And I feel like what we've talked about right now, we could go on and we'll spiral into a bunch of other things itself. So I'll quickly just ask, are there any from you two that would like to have any closing comments regarding the protest itself? Maybe it's their journey, maybe it's something that's happened with a celebrity, or maybe it's a response by the government or by the officers out there that you'd like to mention before we close off this episode itself.
I have a message for the youth listening to this, because the protest, even if the governments pull back the laws tomorrow, it's not going to benefit Punjab. Punjab going to be still at the crisis point. What we got to do is we got to look 25, 50 years down in the future, what the future of Punjab looks like. And Punjab at this moment requires a whole cultural transformation. Okay, so this morcha, the whole farmers movement, it has made abundantly clear that it's time to transform the Punjab's agriculture model in its entirety, to serve the needs of Punjab and to revitalize the economy of Punjab. It needs to have a new outlook and a new Sikh worldview. While we work towards this environment through political structures, we make sure that we help our people on the ground however best we could. That could be through financial support, that could be through educational expertise, whatever that is. Yeah. Other thing, I'd say that it's time that all of the youth, we gotta strengthen our relationship with Naam Bani and Gursehaj, because that's our strengthening point. That's where we get all of our energy or the resistance from. And we gotta have more, learning spaces where we could discuss the issues of Punjab, our future, our survival, because that's everything is at stake right now.
Gurneet, do you have any final comments here? I'd like to explore that more with you in a separate episode itself as well. So Gurneet, do you have any of your own closing comments you'd like to mention?
Well, I don't think I can top what was just said. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But yeah, I implore that everyone continues to put as much pressure as they can and provoke, reactions out of the government. And back in 1984, again, because of the photos and the eyewitness accounts that we have, that's how we're able to understand some of the history that went on then. And this is a turning point in our history as well. So gather as much as videos and eyewitness accounts and photos as you can. So in another 30 years, when our youth will be learning about this time, we're just as informed as, they're just as informed as we are now.
Okay, perfect. Thank you too for joining me in this episode itself as we talk about the protest, the second part of the two-part episode itself. This episode is going to be much longer looking at the time that we've been recording for, but I hope you've managed to sit through with us and enjoy this discussion itself. Once again, I hope you have been sharing this around with maybe not just your Sikh or Punjabi friends or just, any of your friends that might already know about this. Do share it with them, thank you. But also share it with the wider community, and let's have people hear what some of the youth out there think about this, what some of their perspectives are and everything to that. So once again, we'd like to thank the two guests, Gurneet and Gursehaj, for joining me today. And to all the audiences out there, please like, comment, and share this video around. Thank you very much. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa. Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh.